fun, got to find the fun, no choice but to find the fun, mandate, find the fun. Welcome everybody to today's presentation, an intro to Splash's top integrations. I'm your co-host, Zach Napolitano, and joining me today are Splash's solution consultants and integration experts, Ellie Ransom and Faisal Mawani. Ellie, Faisal, how are you today?
Thanks, Zach. I'm excited to be here today to talk through some of our most used integrations.
Yeah, I'll have to echo Ellie's sentiment as well. It's great to be here with you all. Excited to talk through our integrations. How are you doing, Zach?
I'm doing great, thank you. And thank you to everyone for being here today on a Splash webinar about functionality considered table stakes requirement to the savvy event marketer. We're talking integrating event data with your larger tech stack. By the looks of the registrations today, there was a nice mix of technical people in charge of configuring integrations and program leaders or event professionals who need to evaluate the upside of integrating for their organization. Ellie and Faisal, before we cover our agenda, I'd like to pose you a similar question to the one I asked our audience. And if you don't mind, I'd like you to answer to those who are newer to the concept of integrations. And the question is, what would you say the top benefits a user gets when they integrate Splash with their CRM or marketing tech platform?
That's a great question, Zach. I've seen that integrating your event platform into your existing marketing tech stack allows you to save so much time by automating the flow of your event data directly into the other tools you're using. You no longer need to export an upload list or manually change statuses in your CRM tool. This also allows you to measure the impact of your events by having all the data flow into one source of truth for reporting.
Faisal, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, that's a great point, Ellie. And I'll also add to that the benefit of just simplifying cross-team collaboration with a lot of those time-saving options you mentioned, right? Like not having to constantly go back and forth answering how many people have registered, who's registered, has my contact from this company registered, but really allowing the sales team and the greater marketing team and really any team that you work with to be able to access that information on their own in that system of truth, whether that's a Salesforce, a Marketo, or one of the other systems we're going to talk about today.
Got it. And that makes sense. Awesome answers from both of you. Now, I know what the audience is probably wondering, so I'll pose the next question, and I'll take a shot at answering it. But what about virtual, right? Because 99% of the events happening at the time we're recording this today are going to be virtual events. Do virtual events work with the CRM and marketing tech integrations that we're going to be discussing? So we all know that with live events, especially with our customers, they've become awesome with their integrations in the sense that their registration data is pushing to their systems of record, and then live people are walking through the door of those live events. It's easy to check them in and have all of that information sync to their CRMs as well. This is one of the classic value propositions of Splash in integrating. And again, our customers have nailed this. One of the challenges with virtual, though, is best case scenario for a lot of marketers, registration data is showing up and syncing over to their systems of record, but folks are joining their webinars or live streams, and that check-in data is going into the ether, either because they have no visibility into who's showing, or it's going to be a manual process to get that into their systems. This is why Splash has released a three-prong virtual solution, a combination of native webinar integrations, an embed solution, and then connected applications to solve the webinar use cases as well. So just touching on these quickly. The first is something we call the virtual event page touchpoint. This is our solution for all your streaming services, Facebook Live, LinkedIn, YouTube, Vimeo, Twitch, you name it. And what this allows marketers to do is have a fully branded, but also gated experience for their live streams, allowing you to know precisely who showed up to the virtual event, and have them be checked in automatically. And as we know, when that check-in occurs, if you're integrated with those other systems we're going to be talking about today, that shows up there automatically. Next solution is what we call native webinar integrations. This is for probably the primary virtual use case, which are webinars like you're seeing today. We have 3 native webinar integrations: BlueJeans, On24, and Zoom. The latter 2 are coming out to the wider audience this summer. BlueJeans is available to everybody today. And the virtue of these, among a lot of things they automate, is they automatically check all of your attendees in. Again, syncing that information back to your Salesforce, Marketo, HubSpot, whatever system you're using. And then finally, you can use those systems that we're talking about today to generate or create your own webinar integrations. We call these connected applications. So an example of a classic one would be syncing Splash to Marketo and then leveraging a Marketo to On24 integration, which is actually what we're using today. So if you're using any of these 3 virtual solutions, not only is your registration data going to show up in your CRM and marketing automation tech, but your check-in data, who was in the virtual room, so to speak, will find its way there as well. So today's presentation is about our top 5 most popular CRM and marketing tech integrations: Salesforce Sales Cloud, Marketo, HubSpot, Eloqua, and Pardot. We'll provide a full overview of each of these integrations, walk you through its most popular use cases, and details the way our customers are getting value. After that, we'll end with our Q&A. Here is the order we'll be tackling these topics. Faisal, I know I've been yapping quite a bit. Would you be open to leading the charge here and telling us a bit about our integration with Marketo?
Let's jump into it. Thanks, Zach. So hey everyone, today we'll be discussing, like Zach mentioned, the Splash's native integration with Marketo. We'll walk through a few overview slides to highlight the main integration functionality, and then we'll take a look at the recap at the end and bring it all together. So before we really dive in, I just want to kind of set the stage here. There's 3 core pillars to our Marketo integration, and we'll be tackling it in this order. We're going to start with the program creation. From there, we'll talk about the lead sync. And then lastly, we'll talk about the bidirectional functionality. So without further ado, we can jump right in here. Like I mentioned, we'll start with the program auto creation. So really, when you leverage the Marketo integration, your process really starts in Splash with event creation. As you create an event in Splash, we have the ability to clone a specific Marketo program template. And I say specific there because in Splash, we have the concept of event types. That's a customizable drop-down field of event types that you'll be throwing using the Splash platform. With those event types, you can correlate them and map them back to specific Marketo program templates. So we know your webinar program setup might be vastly different than your happy hour program setup. And with that in mind, we allow you to automate the right program creation based on that event type selection in Splash. And I'll dive a little deeper into the program settings in it right here. So here's just a little GIF to kind of show you that in action. As you create it in Splash, it automatically gets filed and created in the Marketo database. So the first step there is kind of selecting that base program to clone from. Depending on what your setup looks like, that could potentially be a new program created just for your Splash events. If you already have a webinar-based program, we can leverage what you've already created. But the key takeaway here is wherever that base program lives in your Marketo database is where all of those event programs will be created. So in this example, you see the Roadshow base template is filed under the TMA events. If I were to use that template, any event I create, the corresponding program will also be listed under that same folder in terms of organization. The next piece is the program naming convention. So with Marketo, we know that you might want somewhat of a unique naming convention that works with whatever your organization is in your Marketo database, and we allow you to do that. Whether it's leveraging dynamic tags in Splash or static text, you can really build that together to build out the exact naming convention you need. So here you see a quick example using event start date with a custom format, event title, event ID. At any point, if you wanted to inject some static text in there, you can feel free to do that. In my personal integration, I title everything FM/event : event title - event date. So you can get pretty particular in terms of what your program naming convention is. And then just know that we also have an update trigger for events. So if you were to change any of those tags or those settings on the Splash backend, we can update that on the Marketo end as well. And that's a little bit more prevalent in my next slide here around program tokens. So in an effort to be fully automated and make the marketing team's life a ton easier in terms of launching events, we've also automated the program token creation. So 100% something I would tell you guys to take advantage of, but ultimately these are the tokens that you can use in your email templates and in your communication to really streamline that and make that a lot quicker and more efficient to scale out. I would say at a minimum, you probably want some high-level event information from Splash filed into your token. So think event title, event start date, event venue, potentially some additional information there around location in terms of city, state, zip if you wanted. But really, there's no limit on what data you can map back to Marketo program tokens. It's just a matter of creating that in the mapping screen on the integration itself. And we'll take a look at that mapping screen in just a minute here. And then the last thing to consider with your Marketo program setup is the channel itself. So on the Splash side, you do not have the ability to customize or edit any of our attendee statuses, but by way of this integration, you can create a mapping table with the Splash statuses and how they correlate to your specific Marketo program channel statuses. And you can kind of create that mapping one-to-one or one-to-many, depending on how you have that program channel status set up in the back end of Marketo. The next part of the integration, the next big component, is the lead sync. So with Splash, we have the ability to both create and update leads in your Marketo database. By default, we do a lookup based on email address. If you have duplicates in Marketo that duplicate leads that are using the same email address, you have a few options in terms of what duplicate do you want to work with. Our system will let you work with the most recently created lead, the most recently modified lead, or the first created lead out of that pool of duplicates. So you can really try to work with the exact lead that you should be updating. That being said, as far as creating and updating these leads, we can map any data from the Splash form back to the lead record. And a question I get pretty often is, does everything from Splash have to map over? And the answer is no. You have full control over the lead mapping. So I would say some of the basic fields like first name, last name, email, company name, job title, potentially some marketing or terms and conditions opt-in like you see in this image, probably all useful information to house in Marketo. Potentially some additional information around t-shirt size or some ancillary information you might not need in Marketo. That's totally up to you to decide. But the added feature here is you also have the ability to map hidden fields. So if you're tracking UTM parameters for any of your events and want to kind of see what conversion looks like for a couple of your advertising tools, that's fine. Collect that on Splash. We have native capabilities to support UTM. And then in terms of mapping it, even though it's a hidden field, it maps the same way any other field would. You just need a map field on the Marketo side to write into. With that, I'll show you a quick preview of the backend in Splash. With this integration, everything is implemented and managed on the Splash side. So you do have to create an API user in Marketo, but once you authenticate, everything is built and managed from the Splash side. So really quickly here, you can see in the middle, we have the base program selection. Under that, you have a few of your mappings. So first up, you have the program naming convention, then you have the token mappings, the channel status mappings, and lastly, the field mappings, which would be for the lead object. So it's pretty simple in terms of building out this integration. But on the Splash side, we do have technical services that we can help walk you through. And of course, we have tons of documentations and guides on this as well. So with that being said, I will jump into the third component of this integration, the bidirectional sync, and arguably my most exciting part of this integration. So really the bidirectional component makes collaboration easy, kind of what me and Ellie talked about a little bit earlier. But if you have all of your data across all of your systems of record, it makes collaboration super simple. And this is a bidirectional sync really between the guest list in Splash and the program member list in Marketo. So let's say you get an event created in Splash, everything is ready to go, you're ready to curate your invite list and sync that in. Whether you want to do that on the Marketo side, on the Splash side, it really doesn't matter. It's all up to your workflow. And if we take it even a level deeper here, you can start to leverage some of the other applications you have connected to Marketo. So let's say you have Marketo and Salesforce. Maybe you want to curate the guest list in Salesforce, have your account executives or your sales team nominate a few attendees. That will then sync into Marketo. And by way of the bidirectional sync that we have with Marketo, that'll then trickle down into Splash. So it's very important. And really, it's truly a bidirectional sync between the Splash guest list and the Marketo program member list. If you make some program level changes in Marketo, those will not sync down to Splash. We do have an update trigger from Splash event updates into Marketo, but that component is not bidirectional. So with that, we'll jump into a quick recap. And what I want to show you guys and walk you through here is what an average integrated customer looks like. Of course, this process could be slightly tweaked, but starting in the top left, like we mentioned, you really create that event in Splash. Depending on the event type that you select, we'll clone a specific Marketo-based program template. From there, you have your bidirectional sync kick in. So wherever you want to curate that guest list, whether that's Marketo, Splash, or another system, they'll always be in sync, and that data will be available across all platforms. And as attendees get those invites, start to RSVP, they're going to receive a confirmation email immediately, whether that comes from the Splash system or the Marketo system, totally up to you. But by way of that RSVP, they also get written into the program member list. So if they weren't already on the program member list, they'll get added to it. If they were already on there, their status will get updated to the equivalent of the registered status. And then fast forward to check-in on the day of the event, whether that's virtual check-in or in-person check-in. That's strictly another status update. So that same lead record gets yet another ping on the program member list to update to a checked-in or equivalent status. And then from there, it's really up to you in terms of how you want to follow up, whether that's a simple thank you email from Marketo or whether that's a larger drip campaign that you want to drop these attendees into. So pretty straightforward there. And we'll look at some of the upsides of integrating and kind of the key benefits here. Really, I think you'll get this from the conversation I've had so far, but it's all about automation in my eyes, the automation of the program and campaign creation, the automation of the lead sync, and that's both creating and maintaining leads and program members, and then the automation of the program tokens. And combined, that'll really save your team a ton of time in terms of launching and reporting on events. But then you also get those collaboration benefits, right? Those cross-team collaboration, whether that's only in Marketo, whether that's leveraging Marketo in a system like Salesforce, but really getting that data everywhere you need. And last but not least, compliance. With Marketo, we do make it very easy to sync compliance and opt-ins both from the Splash system back to Marketo and vice versa. So I put that at the end there, but definitely not the least important, because we all know with GDPR and all the other provisions out in place, compliance has to be top of mind these days. So that kind of wraps up our Marketo segment. Hopefully that overview was very helpful. And Zach, I will kick it back to you now to talk through Salesforce.
Thank you, Faisal. Tremendous job. Let's talk about Salesforce. Salesforce Sales Cloud is Splash's most popular CRM integration. It's also, I'm going to make an argument here, our most flexible. In my experience working with customers the last few years on this integration, I'd say it solves around 95% of the use cases I've encountered. So let's begin with an overview of its most important capabilities. The first one is how it integrates with the campaign object. So two main behaviors here to think about. You can have the creation of a new event in Splash trigger the auto creation of a new campaign in Salesforce, or for some users, they prefer to link up an existing campaign with an event, which is also very easy to do just by inserting your campaign ID. Salesforce admins love this piece of the integration because of the configurability. Specifically, the naming convention that you're able to establish by mapping fields back to Salesforce. You could also create your campaigns with all of your campaign's normal required fields like start date, event type, and so on. The next piece of this is the campaign member syncing. So after the connection between the created event and the campaign are established, a bidirectional integration then exists between the campaign member list in Salesforce and the guest list in Splash. Put simply, when registrations occur in Splash, those campaign members will be created in Salesforce and their campaign member statuses will update. And what you'll see here, another perk of the integration, is you can map each Splash guest list status to the naming convention of the campaign member statuses you use in Salesforce. So Splash may use the term RSVPs for a registration. Your organization may use attending. You're able to establish that right in the config. Next up, the creation and maintenance of new leads and contacts. So put simply here, when a guest registers for your event, Splash is going to send that information to Salesforce. Salesforce is going to look up the unique identifier of the registration, that's typically the email address, and see if there's a duplicate or not. If there is a existing lead or contact in Salesforce, great. Nothing happens. Maybe we update a field or two. It's your decision. If there isn't, we can create or generate a new lead or contact based on the behavior you're setting up. The other beautiful part about this is each registration field on the Splash form, including custom fields, are able to map back to both lead and contact objects. So here's a typical setup. The most common one we see, there is variance, but I just want to run you through a quick flow. Splash user creates an event. We're generating a new campaign in Salesforce. The event's promoted, guests register. We're adding a campaign member with a campaign member status. The day the event happens, we're checking in guests. That campaign member status in Salesforce is updating to checked in. A new person registers, a new person checks in that we haven't seen before. We're creating a new lead or contact based on how your organization wants that to work. And then there's that campaign member sync that's happening at all times in real time. An email sent, that's updating the campaign member status to invited. RSVP no, RSVP yes, checked in. Those are all triggering corresponding campaign member status updates. Now, what about the bidirectional part that I referenced earlier? And I'm sure you've heard this term before. It's a bit of a buzzword. Let's unpack that a bit. So what I like to do is frame this up from the perspective of what don't event marketers like to do? And frankly, what probably they shouldn't be doing now that it's 2020? Well, juggling a bunch of Excel spreadsheets and feeling super disorganized, being asked by everyone on the sales team for updates on RSVPs, and then exporting guest lists and emailing out reports all day. When Splash and Salesforce speak to each other in a bidirectional way, that eliminates all that time-wasting drudgery by establishing a real-time source of truth within the Salesforce campaign. So not only can salespeople check the campaign for updates on each campaign member in their respective status, but they could also add campaign members to the campaign so the Splash user knows who to invite and doesn't have to export a bunch of stuff and juggle a bunch of spreadsheets. So let's take a look at the flow from beginning to end. The sales team adds leads and contacts to the Salesforce campaign. These are the folks that they'd like to see invited to an upcoming event. Now, the event marketer in Splash comes to their guest list, hits the Sync with Salesforce button, and this is pulling in all of those campaign members, along with custom fields such as contact owner, company, and job title. This has the added bonus of empowering the Splash user to filter and sort their guest list by Salesforce fields. Next, the event is marketed, the invites are sent, RSVPs are submitted, RSVPs are declined, guests are checked in the day of the event, campaign member status updates are happening all the time and in real time. So this enables the sales team to view their leads and contact and their engagement simply by visiting the campaign in Salesforce, which is where they're conducting business as part of their day-to-day. With both systems talking to each other, guest list updates are no longer siloed with just the event marketer. Okay, to wrap things up, let's go over the integration's key benefits and answer the question, what's the upside of integrating? Splash's bidirectional integration with Salesforce Sales Cloud automates the creation of new campaigns, creates and maintains leads and contacts, streamlines the collaboration between sales and marketing teams, and enables you to measure events' return on investment. All right, that's it for Salesforce Sales Cloud. Next up on the list, we have HubSpot, led by Ellie. Ellie, take it away.
I'm going to be talking about the HubSpot integration, as Zach mentioned, and next to Marketo, this is, I think, from the numbers, our second most used marketing automation tool integration. As many customers that are using Marketo, we also see using HubSpot. So for the HubSpot integration, excuse me, not only are you able to capture net new contacts through it, but you're also able to track which contacts have registered and attended your events through this integration. So there are two parts to this integration. I'm going to go through both of them. I'm talking high level through the slides. One is about creating and updating contacts, and the other one is about specifically the timeline integration and how you can track that event level data and use that information on the HubSpot side. As far as creating and updating contacts, so the way the integration works is when a guest fills out a registration form on a Splash page, as you can see here, with first name, last name, email address, Splash can push all of that data over to HubSpot so that any existing contact can be updated. By first capturing all these details about the guest, the integration can update any field over on the HubSpot side, be it a custom or standard field that might exist. And if the contact does not already exist, because for most of our customers, we see that they have a lot of net new prospects, leads, et cetera, come in through their events, we are able to create new contacts on the HubSpot side. And we are able to avoid creating any duplicates because we match on email address. Since that's a unique identifier in Splash, we look for an existing contact of HubSpot. If they exist, we'll update. If they don't exist, we will create a new, and then we'll fill in any missing information about that individual. So if you want to make sure you're capturing that information in HubSpot, you can also capture it on the registration form, which, as most of you are aware, is fully customizable to what questions you need to ask. The second part of this integration is capturing that event level detail on the contact's timeline itself. So anytime a person registers for an event or checks into the event the day of, Splash will add that activity onto the contact's timeline in HubSpot. And these timeline activities can be triggered for any status change that might happen in Splash. So if you want to know in HubSpot who's been invited to the event, who's registered, who has registered no, who checked into the event, maybe even who's on the wait list, we can push that data into HubSpot so you'll be able to see that on the contact itself. And you can filter all that contact information as well, or all that timeline activity as well on the contact itself. So you can see specifically what Splash activity has occurred for that contact. And then what's also useful is that all these details about the event are part of that timeline activity. So you can see the event name, the location, who created the event, and then use that information to create lists in HubSpot, which is the next part of this. So the timeline integration does create a new set of properties that can then be used to filter your contacts into lists. So you're able to create a list of anyone who attended your VIP happy hour, or you can see who registered but never showed up to the event itself. And then you're able to use that data to create workflows off of, maybe add someone to a drip campaign, based on the fact that they actually attended an event, Or maybe you want to filter everyone that ever attended an event in New York City and then invite them to your next New York City-based event or your next San Francisco-based event. You'll be able to do all of that in HubSpot based on this timeline integration. So in summary, it's a little bit more simple because this integration is only a single direction of splash pushing data into HubSpot, but you're able to create and update those contacts and all the contact information you have in HubSpot. You're able to track all event status changes that occur that you want to make sure you're capturing in HubSpot. And then you're able to create lists and set up workflows based on that event level data in your HubSpot instance. And having all of this event data synced into your marketing automation tool allows you to create really targeted communications post-event and pull all of your data around your marketing efforts into just one tool. Faisal, on that note, I'm going to pass this over to you to talk through our next integration with Eloqua.
Awesome. Thanks, Ellie. And before I jump into Eloqua, I just need to make my light update here to reflect the light of the color of the integration. I don't know if you guys have been noticing that behind me. But with Eloqua, okay, so I will be going through for this session our Eloqua integration. It is a native integration. It is a single direction integration. So I wanted to call that out right up front. This integration only has data flowing from Splash into Eloqua. So same concept here. We'll go through the overview slides, highlight the integration's main functionality, and then jump in and take a look at the recap and tie it all together. Before I dive in, just a quick lay of the land. So with our Eloqua integration, it is actually 3 unique integrations that you can piecemeal together to kind of create the best workflow for you. So the first integration is the campaign integration. The second is the contacts integration. And then the third is the custom data objects integration. And when I say kind of piecemeal it together, for whatever your needs are, you could always use one of those 3, 2 of those 3, or all 3 integrations and still have data flowing effectively. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. For the first integration, the campaign integration, similar to some of our other integrations that have event-level triggers, when an event is created in Splash, we have the ability to auto-create an Eloqua campaign. The difference here is with the Canvas template in Eloqua, that can be unique per event type. So again, I'll use the same example. If you're throwing a webinar or a happy hour and a large multi-day conference, that's going to be a vastly different canvas for your campaign in Eloqua. And we have the ability to create those canvases per event type. So again, you could create one campaign canvas that works for all of your events in Splash, great. Or you could create multiple that are tied to those event types to make sure you have the campaign created exactly as you need. The next component with our campaign integration is the naming convention. So again, you can use any combination of static and or dynamic text to build out that naming convention. Here, what you see is potentially event type and title - start date - unique identifier. But really, you can label that however you need. So in my instance, I label everything FM Splash event so I can easily find them, : event title - event date - event venue. Pretty straightforward here. The one call out is, like I mentioned, you need to start this process from Splash. You cannot tie an existing Eloqua campaign to a pre-created Splash event. You need to let Splash create the campaign. The next integration is the contacts integration. So we have the ability to create and update contacts in Eloqua. Again, whatever information you collect on the front end is mappable back to Eloqua, but not all of that information is forced to go back. So you have full control at the field level. The one thing we'll call out here is this integration uses email as our unique identifier and uses email as the lookup. So if you have multiple duplicates in Eloqua, we give you a few settings on, what you want to work with: the most recently created, the first created, or the most recently modified contact. But if for whatever reason you need a lot more flexibility in terms of updating or the lookup conditions, anything like that, There is another method to write from Splash into Eloqua that gives you a lot more flexibility. You can use our webhooks every time somebody registers or gets invited to an event to ping an Eloqua form post, theoretically matching the same exact form that you would have in Splash. But on the Eloqua form, what you can do is say, all right, I want to do a lookup based on email, first name, and the last name, and I want to update whatever these fields are. So it gives you that added layer of flexibility in terms of the lookup conditions, but if email is a good enough identifier for your workflow, highly encourage you to just use the out-of-the-box Splash contact integration because it is so simple to set up and so easy to authenticate once you have any of the other integrations live as well. And then one added call out, I mentioned all the fields on the front end form can be mapped. We also have the concept of hidden fields. So whether that's used for UTM parameters or any other unique identifiers, all hidden fields can map over pretty much the same way. They're just not displayed on the front end, but in the mapping configuration on the back end of Splash, you would map it like any other field. And for the sake of time, I'll keep things moving here, and we'll talk about our last component of the Eloqua integration, which is the custom data objects. I can potentially sit here and talk to you guys for 30 minutes just about CDOs and how flexible they are and what you can achieve. But I think I'll cover some high-level use cases here that I see most often, and then I'll encourage you, if this is an integration you want to take advantage of or an integration you want to learn more on, reach out to your account executive or reach out to your customer success manager, and we can set up a call with someone like myself or Ellie from the solutions team who can really dive into your workflow and get deeper. But with that being said, the CDO integration is probably the most popular out of the three when it comes to Eloqua because it allows for the most flexibility and the most reporting. What we see most often is clients set up a specific CDO per event type or per region, depending how the team is split up. And then having, so let's say you set it up for a webinar, then you can have all attendee data filter into this CDO anytime something happens, right? So Ellie at splashthat.com gets invited. Let's write her into the CDO. As soon as she clicks through and RSVPs and actually registers for the event, status update can get written into that CDO. And then fast forward to the day of the event, we check her in at the door or virtually, and that then makes another post to the CDO. So you really get a report of attendee lifecycle. It's just a matter of how you want to segment that. So I mentioned by event type might be an option, by region might be an option, potentially by event date may be an option. But we're really flexible in terms of how many CDOs we can write to as well. So whether that's 1 or 5 CDO pings happening on an attendee action, that's fine. I would just encourage you to think through this process and think through the value of the CDOs and the reporting that you want to get. And from there, let's have a conversation. Let's dive a little deeper into this integration and make sure it will work for you. So with that being said, I'll jump into my recap here. Again, I want to walk you through kind of an average integrated customer, and then we'll take a look at some of the key benefits. So starting in the top left, we mentioned that everything has to start in Splash. So you'll start by creating an event in Splash, and that would trigger the campaign creation with the specific Canvas template tied to that event type. Again, note that if you weren't using the campaign integration, we can kind of just skip those steps altogether. But then as you start to promote your page and people start to register for your Splash page, 2 things can happen. The first, we can make the contact integration fire. So whether that's creating a new contact in your database or updating an existing one with this added information. But at the same time, if you leverage the CDO integration and you go take this dotted line down, as soon as somebody RSVPs, that can also trigger a post to that specific CDO with whatever fields you have mapped. Fast forward to the day of the event, you manage check-in again virtually or at the door. That can then make another ping to the same CDO or potentially a new CDO based on status changes and specifically attendee status changes. So you kind of see how I have this filtered in here because it can be so flexible. So again, take this with a grain of salt, average integrated customer workflow, but of course we can tweak it as needed for any custom scoping or custom workflow needs with Eloqua. That being said, let's jump into the recap and the upside of integrating. And again, you're going to see a lot of my repeat comments here. So automation, automation, automation. First, automation of the Eloqua campaign creation. Second, automation of the lead maintenance and creation. That's going to lead to your simplified collaboration across different teams, or even within your own team if it's a larger team. And that data can trickle down from Eloqua into any other integrated system to make that life easier. And then the ability to sync to CDOs. That's not extremely common with everyone's Eloqua integration. So it's something to call out. It does give you that added layer of flexibility in terms of how you want your data to work and what you want to do with your data in the back end. And then again, last but not least, compliance, opt-ins, and unsubscribes. Compliance is top of mind for Splash, and we want to make sure that we make it very easy for you to stay compliant with whatever workflow you choose, whether that's sending emails out of Eloqua, out of Splash, or out of both systems. So Ellie, with that, I will kick it back to you to cover Pardot here.
Oop.
Sorry, I switched that for you.
No, I'm still being bad with the clicking through. Thanks for that, Faisal. So yeah, I'm going to talk about our integration with Pardot now, which is another one of our marketing automation tool integrations, because as you can tell from today that it's really important. Event marketing has been for a long time one of those missing steps of the marketing automation world. And so being able to integrate your event platform into marketing automation tools just really helps you sync all of your data into one place and one source of truth, which is why we have all of these tools in place. So our Pardot integration specifically allows you to create and update prospects, just like we've been talking about today with all of our other integrations. It's really important to have up-to-date and accurate information about the people you're interacting with. And second, we're also able to capture registration information through the use of form handlers. So if you're not familiar with form handlers, we will talk through them a little bit today. But if you are familiar with form handlers, you're already aware of how they function. This should make a lot of sense for you. But first and foremost, the ability for us to create and update prospects. So like many of our other integrations, as someone registers and fills out a form on an event page, we're able to push that data back into Pardot. So if there is already an existing prospect that exists, we can update the information on that prospect's record in Pardot. Similar to our other integrations, if they don't exist, then the integration has the ability to create a net new prospect. And again, we're using that email address as the unique identifier so that we're able to avoid creating duplicates. Also note any field that you might be capturing on the registration form. It's just a mapping exercise on the configuration screen to say what field it should be passed back to into Pardot. And for those that might be asking, well, what about the Pardot campaign? A lot of our customers will create a custom campaign or a new campaign for their events so that they know which contacts were created through the Splash integration. So they'll all be associated with that event campaign. We also have some customers that are creating new campaigns per event so that they see which prospects were created for which specific event. You really have the flexibility there to determine what is necessary. The second part of this integration, as I mentioned, is the form handlers part of this, which allows you to capture that event level data. So not just the details about the contact, but now what events they've registered for, what events they've attended, and what events they were waitlisted on. And not only will this data be on the form handler, you'll also be able to see on the prospect all the form handlers that they're associated with. So you'll be able to get that view of the event attendance for each individual. And what the form handler allows you to automatically track which guests have registered for an event. And you can also automatically track any status change that you want to know about. So whether they registered no, they checked in and showed up to the event, they were added to a wait list. And what I don't have written out here, but what's also possible is that being able to capture unsubscribe information. So some of our customers are creating a unique form handler for unsubscribes So if you're sending emails out of Splash, we can send that data to a form handler, and then you can use completion actions to say, update this person so that they're unsubscribed from all email campaigns. And similar to that, you can use the completion actions on the form handlers to accomplish a lot of different tasks. What you will see here, this person checked into the event, and the form handler for check-in specifically adjusted their lead score. So this is a completion action that was part of this form handler. A lot of our customers have many different completion actions they've set in place that can be really helpful to help automate some of your workflows. If you want to send your confirmation emails out of Pardot instead of Splash, some of our customers are doing that. So they're using this feature that if someone registers for an event, then the completion action is to trigger that confirmation email. Completion for the check-in data, like this example here, is really helpful to adjust their lead score based on the fact that they actually attended an event. And again, that's something that can be customized on the Pardot side of what you want to happen for each form handler. So in summary of all of this, the Pardot integration has two main parts to it. We're able to create and update prospects information in Pardot based on the information that's being collected on that registration form. And then form handlers can be used to track any details about the events that the prospects are attending. So being able to see what they registered for, if they check in and show up to the event, then being able to see that they checked in, and then also being able to maintain your compliance by capturing that they might have unsubscribed for an event. And then you're also at the, and then all of this activity is really consolidating all of your data into one tool. So you'll know everything about all of your marketing campaigns in one place, not just your emails, but also your event level data. So it really comes down to sending all of your data into a single source of truth. On that note, I'll pass this back to Zach. I think we've got a handful of questions that we are ready to answer. Zach, I think you might be on mute.
Yes, I was. Let me try that again. We'll edit that out in post. Thank you, Ellie, and thank you, Ellie and Faisal. Phenomenal stuff. We are up to the Q&A. We did have a bunch of questions pre-submitted, and we had a few questions from the audience. Before we get to your questions, we're going to ask you one more question just so we understand who you are a little bit better. That question is, do you have a live Splash integration? So if you have a moment, fill that out for us, and then we're going to jump right into your questions. Okay. As you're doing that, I'm going to pull up a couple of questions asked during the webinar today, and I'll throw these out to Ellie and Faisal. One question came from Johnny. His question was, is it possible to import marketing opt-in data, an opt-in tick box, into HubSpot so we could add them to marketing lists, etc.? We plan to run email campaigns via HubSpot.
So I can take this. When you say import marketing opt-in data, there's a couple different options here. One is being able to capture that information on the registration form. So you do have the ability in Splash to add any custom question, and one of those custom questions we often see is some sort of marketing opt-in or acknowledgement of a privacy notice, etc. So first of all, suggest putting that on your registration form, because a lot of this is required to be captured at the point of collection, right? So once that's collected, then you can pass that back into your marketing automation tools such as HubSpot by mapping that field from the registration form into whatever field it needs to be mapped to in HubSpot. Another flow we've seen for this is related to marketing opt-ins, but what if somebody opts in and then opts in and then unsubscribes? Similar to the Pardot integration that I mentioned, you can do the same type of thing with the HubSpot integration and the timeline activity, that if someone unsubscribes, you can add that activity to their timeline and then use that timeline activity to filter and create a workflow. So if they unsubscribe from an email in Splash, you can add that information through the workflow so that they get unsubscribed on the HubSpot side. There's a couple other flows through this, but definitely suggest reaching out to your CSM if this is not already implemented with your HubSpot instance, and we can talk through the best flow possible to complete this.
Great stuff. Thank you, Ellie. Faisal, this next one is for you, and I think we answered this one during a recent webinar we did together on integrations having to do with virtual. And that question is, can we sync multiple individual Zoom accounts to one team Splash account? This would allow each team member the autonomy to schedule and sync their own events without the need to schedule, host, sync all events from one specific Zoom account. And this is from Crystal.
Awesome. Yeah, great question, Crystal. And the answer is yes. So assuming you are using Zoom webinars in this instance, the way our integration works is you would set up the integration at the account level. So for everyone in your Splash account, of course, you could trigger it for a specific event type like webinar. And then the way the mapping works is, let's say Ellie was on your team and created an event. She becomes the event owner in Splash. The integration will try to make her the event owner in Zoom based on an email mapping. So if she has a Zoom webinar license under ellie@splashthat.com, if she does, it's automatically going to make her the Zoom webinar owner. If she does not have Zoom webinar access, it's going to default to the account that authenticated the integration. So think of that as kind of like your fallback account, the one that actually builds out the integration. And assuming everyone uses the same login email address in Splash and in Zoom webinars, it will automate that flow and live under their Zoom webinar account specifically. So hopefully that answers your question, but feel free to ping in the QA chat if you have any follow-ups.
Awesome. Thank you, Faisal. So let's move ahead to some of the pre-submitted ones, and I guess we could take a look at our poll results here. Interesting results. Everyone on the line says we haven't integrated yet, but we plan to, which is the perfect audience for today. Okay, let's get into some questions. First one up. Kelsey, are there plans to add new native integrations for webinar platforms such as GoToWebinar and Zoom? I think I could take this one, Faisal, and back me up if I miss anything. Zoom is in the works for the summer. GoToWebinar is not on our immediate roadmap. However, we spoke about connected applications a bit earlier in today's webinar. Using another connector such as maybe Zapier or a CRM, an integration like that is possible and currently being utilized by some of our customers. Beautiful. Next up, Reginald. What else do you integrate with? Oh, wow. Ellie, that's a softball for you to knock out of the park. Thank you, Reginald, for the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Which, as you previously mentioned, we do currently integrate with a few webinar tools. Currently, BlueJeans and Zoom is launching. Zoom and On24 are launching soon. We also have integrations with Slack and with Greenhouse, which is an applicant tracking system. We also have an open REST API, so we have a handful of clients who are building out custom integrations. They're also using our webhooks framework to allow for other custom integrations where they're just triggering data from Splash into maybe a data warehouse, pretty common. And then we have connectors on different iPaaS systems. Zach, you mentioned Zapier. We also have a connector on Vertify, which allows you to connect all your different tools to each other through a integration platform as a service tool. And then we support a huge ecosystem of connected apps. This includes meeting management tools, attendee apps, and this list is constantly evolving. So if you're interested in any of these tools, I always suggest reach out to your CSM, set up a conversation. They'll probably pull in Faisal or I to continue that conversation, but we're happy to talk through what your needs are.
Thank you, Ellie. Next question. This is from Julie. This one, Faisal and Ellie, you both get access to this one quite a bit, so I'll let whoever wants to take it. If we have Marketo and Salesforce talking to each other and our best practice / setup as everything running from Marketo to Salesforce, then syncing, do we need to set up both the Marketo and Salesforce integrations? What is the benefit of each? What would we get from the Salesforce integration that we can't get from the Marketo integration? Julie, very thorough question there.
Yeah, I'll take this one too. The answer's kind of in the question right there already, that they already have everything running from Marketo into Salesforce. And when I get this question, it really depends on current workflows, the type of events that are being hosted. But a lot of times marketing teams want that data flowing first into Marketo so that they can either clean it up. Maybe they want to do some lead nurturing, some lead scoring before they pass those leads over to Salesforce. There's a lot of different reasons. But typically we like to not disrupt workflows, just enhance them. So in that use case, I would say integrate directly into Marketo, let that data still flow the way you expect it into Marketo before it's passed over to Salesforce. Not always the case. We do have some customers that use that same tech stack, but they're going directly into Salesforce. And one of the benefits we see from that scenario is having that direct connection with your sales team, because they're probably not in Marketo. And while both do have a bidirectional sync, and Marketo and Salesforce both have a bidirectional sync, sometimes we'll see the events team wants to open up that event campaign that you talked through, Zach, earlier, to the sales team so they can add their leads and contacts directly onto the campaign to suggest to be invited to events. In those scenarios, it can be a little bit easier for that collaboration to have Splash go to Salesforce and skip Marketo, especially if the event program is geared towards mostly existing contacts or qualified leads already, and not and less focused on completely net new leads. So there isn't necessarily that need to go through Marketo. So no requirement one way or the other, but I always like to discuss what's your current workflow and what are you trying to accomplish with this.
In other words, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Thank you, Ellie. Hopefully we have time for another question or two. We're running out of time. However, we're close. Now that we have Marketo connected to Splash, are we able to build custom lists in Splash using data captured in Marketo? And this was asked by Lauren.
I can jump in on this one. So with the bidirectional sync that we were talking about with Marketo, right, it's obvious that you can pull in any data you have in Marketo into fields, standard or custom fields on the Splash side. Once that data is in Splash, it's actually really easy to segment the guest list and build out your own list within Splash. So whether you wanted to do a VIP list based on job title, a geo list based on region or company, anything like that, it's just a matter of filtering on the Splash side and creating a new list and kind of bulk adding guests to that list. So the answer here is, in short, yeah, you can use the data you collect in Marketo that you sync to Splash to then segment different lists and save those lists to the event.
Thanks, Faisal. And with that, that'll do it for today. To learn more about Splash's integrations, check out the resources to your left, my right, and visit our help center at support.splashthat.com. For more programming like what you saw today, head to splashthat.com/webinars. Life is a series of hellos and goodbyes. I'm afraid just for now, this is goodbye. On behalf of Ellie and Faisal, this is Zach saying, mahalo.